As an entrepreneur, how do you bring happiness and success into your workplace? Today, I'm talking with Jim Barnett, a highly experienced and super successful entrepreneur and CEO, about this very topic. Jim's high-profile career includes roles as CEO and co-founder of Whisk. He was previously co-founder and CEO of Glint, which got acquired by LinkedIn, and had leadership positions at companies like Turn, AltaVista, and Ancestry.com. With a deep passion for helping people and managers succeed, Jim has developed invaluable insights into building a thriving, positive workplace culture. In our conversation, Jim shares his journey of understanding happiness and consciousness, beginning with the observation that external success does not guarantee personal happiness. We talk about his experiences with meditation and conscious leadership and how these can be applied in today's company. We also discuss the importance of authenticity, gratitude, and curiosity in leadership, and how these principles help navigate the complexities of modern management. Jim is one of the most experienced voices in the field of employee engagement and culture, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Welcome to another episode of The Conscious Entrepreneur. Hey, Jim, thanks so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to see you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to having fun with you.
Now, I don't normally do this when I do introductions for people. Normally, I just say things like, yeah, hey, Jim Barnett, you're the CEO of Whisk, and that's about it. But I think in this instance, it's worth doing a little bit of a tour through your history of experience and your resume, just as a way of sharing the background that we're going to be talking about today. So feel free to plug in the holes that I am certain I will have. But as far as I understand, you are currently the CEO and co-founder of Whisk. You were previously the co-founder of a company called Glint that got bought by LinkedIn. You were previously the co-founder and CEO and chairman of a company called Turn. You have been a general partner at a VC fund. You were the president of Overture Search. You were the CEO of AltaVista. You were the president of Ancestry.com. And you were even the CEO of a video games company back in the 90s. I'm sure I missed some stuff, but the reason I'm pointing this out is, you're coming to this conversation with a tremendous amount of experience on how to start and grow companies. What did I miss from that list?
Oh, I don't think you missed anything important. I was laughing because it's sort of a long list. I guess that means, I'm not young anymore.
Well, we're here to get your experience, and experience you certainly have. I was really interested to see that with all your experience, you talk about yourself as being passionate about bringing happiness and success to the workplace. And so I'm really curious how, after this tremendous career and all this experience that you've had over many, many years, happiness in the workplace and success in the workplace turned out to be like your calling. How did this become your thing?
Oh, wow. That is such a great question. I love that question. So it was by accident. I started my career and I worked at a very successful company where the leaders of the company didn't seem very happy. And then I went to work for an entertainment entrepreneur who was also extremely successful from a financial perspective, but again, just didn't really seem that happy. And then I went into private equity and worked with a senior partner who, again, was really outwardly successful, but not that happy. And this was a real wake-up call for me because I had sort of grown up with this mindset that if you achieve X and Y and Z, then that's going to equal happiness.
Sure. Yeah.
But, obviously that's not the case because, here I've got 3 examples of people that have achieved a lot, but yet didn't really seem all that happy in life. And so that led me on to this exploration and study and hobby of understanding happiness and consciousness that I've been on the last 35 years.
And so you saw it, by the way, this will not be a surprise to listeners of the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast or people who attend the events that we put on that, hey, lo and behold, happiness is not driven by all this external stuff. Happiness is driven by internal factors. So what did you wind up doing? How did you start to investigate this? And what did you learn about yourself in the process?
Well, it started with a relatively simple, but at the time, not that popular thing, which was someone taught me to meditate.
Okay.
And I was living in Los Angeles at the time. They said, there's this monk, Sinjen Young, at Community Meditation Center. He does these one-day retreats. And I went on this one-day retreat and I fell in love with meditation. And literally from that day on for 34 years, I've had a daily meditation practice where I meditate for about an hour every day. When I was younger, it was only during the week because the weekends were filled with lots of young kids and family stuff. But, some days it doesn't work for a particular reason, an early flight or something. But, it started with meditation, and, meditation just led to me sort of wanting to know more about consciousness and happiness, and started working with coaches. Started going on retreats, and this sort of became, as you said, my calling.
And, this was not that common. So you're talking about 30 plus years ago. So this is in the 90s. It was nowhere near as common as it is today to have executives talking about mindfulness and meditation. I'm curious about how that was received by your peers and those around you. What did they think when you were doing this? Was it like, hey, this is totally woo? Or they were like, oh, Jim, this is, totally on brand for you. We're not surprised at all.
I think it was sort of woo-woo back then. I actually remember a funny story. I was out with the third boss in that story and he was sort of a curmudgeon-y private equity guy. And we're out to dinner with this company where we're looking at acquiring the company. And the founder of the company says, one of the keys to, his success and happiness is that he meditates. So I took a chance. I said, oh, that's really interesting. I meditate too. And what shocked me is that the senior partner that I worked with said, well, that's interesting. I just started to meditate. But it was definitely, this is the 90s, and it was definitely let's just say a much smaller community back then.
Yeah. Now, I mean, the number of people who come on this podcast and talk about their meditation practice is really high. And we know that it's such an incredible part of maintaining one's own well-being. I know that you're a fan of conscious leadership, specifically the Conscious Leadership Group and the book, 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. Yeah. When did that come into your life, and how did your life change once you started working with them?
So I'll tell you, my sort of path of consciousness, I used to listen to all these CDs. It was CDs back then, right? This was pre sort of internet. And, there was a company that's still very successful today. It's still one of the very best at this, called Sounds True.
Oh, yeah, sure. Tammy has been on our podcast.
Oh, well, Tammy's amazing. I love Tammy, and I love the work that she's done in the service she's given to humanity. But I used to listen to people like Ram Dass and Stephen Levine back in the 90s. And I enjoyed that a lot. But then actually through YPO, I went on a retreat with a YPO facilitator who's, very well known in sort of in the Bay Area and other YPO groups, a guy by the name of Jim Warner. And it was a game-changing retreat for several of us in the forum, where just sort of a light went on, like, wow, I actually can do things in my life to lead to more happiness, and I want to do that. And so I started working with Jim, and over time, he referred me to a woman by the name of Diana Chapman, who is one of the founders of Conscious Leadership Group with Jim Dethmer, who I also knew independently through doing some retreats together. And I started working with Diana, I don't know exactly how long it's been, but probably 14 years ago. And I just started committing to leading my life in a more conscious way and to leading my companies in a more conscious way. And interestingly enough, what that meant was, you mentioned earlier that I was the founder of Turn, which was the one of the very first companies that were applying machine learning and advanced technology to the advertising ecosystem, I woke up and said, I don't really want to do this. I'm actually not passionate about advertising. What I'm passionate about is helping people be happier and more successful at work. And by the way, I don't even like online advertising. It's annoying. So I left. I found my successor, stayed on the board and stayed active, but I left, and that was a hard move because I had to see that. I had a story that like a good founder would never leave his or her company. Like if you're the founder, you got to stay till the end, right? And one of the gifts that Diana gave me was to see that the opposite of my story could be as true as my story. So the first story was a good founder stays till the end. What if the opposite were true? Like actually your company would be in a better place if it was being led by someone who for whom the purpose of that company was their life calling. Like, what about that? And then sort of the rest is history. I've been working with Diana and working with conscious leadership at my companies for now. With Diana, like 14 years in my companies for I think over 10 years.
So that's a huge shift, and you're talking about learning something about yourself. That basically the way you phrase it was, I can do things that make myself happy, meaning I'm in control or I've got responsibility for my ultimate happiness and how I'm showing up in the world. So you're talking about that, but you're coming from the point of view of, hey, I'm working for these big successful companies. I've got you're a well-known person, right? So this part, you're a high-profile person leading high-profile companies. You've got the mindset that's like, hey, I'm the CEO. I'm going to stick with this until we win. I'm going to do this no matter what. And you're then experiencing a major shift in how you think about that. So when you reflect back on your career and the companies you've been with, how is the Jim who did Glint and now Whisk different from the Jim who was doing everything before that?
Well, the Jim who was doing it before that was really focused on outcomes, was pretty stressed, anxious. Oh, it's so important. We got to get this done. Held things pretty tightly. And it was, sort of through this evolution that, today I think I lead in a much more, I lead more from a place of what I would say awareness, authenticity, and intentionality that's just a little more purpose driven and less sort of outcome focused.
I mean, surely I'll take a wild guess here. The stress and anxiety have not gone away. The need to deliver outcomes has not gone away. This is not like the last 4 or 5 years have been particularly fun for many companies in the tech space, at least in terms of the ups and downs that a lot of companies have been facing. So I can presume that the outer world is still the same. You're still experiencing stuff that's happening in the outer world, but how you're dealing with it yourself is different because of who you've become.
Totally. I remember when I learned so much from these incredible teachers. I could talk about this for hours, but I remember a Ram Dass tape that I was listening to in the 90s. And there was a quote in there. I'm going to butcher it, so I apologize, Ram Dass, up in heaven. If I don't, I'll get the substance right, maybe not the exact words right. But he says something along the lines like, despite all of my chanting and meditation retreats and drugs that I tried, all of my neuroses are still there. He said, but now they're like these little schmoozes as opposed to these like big scary events. And I thought that was a beautiful way to say it. Yes, the patterns that I developed, whether at a young age or throughout my life, generally are still hanging around. But when I'm in a place of consciousness, I notice them more quickly. They don't take a hold of me in the same way, and I'm able to move beyond them faster.
And how does that manifest when you are doing just the day-to-day being a CEO? I mean, so actually, just for context, what's the current size and shape of Whisk as a company?
So Whisk, we started Whisk about 3 years ago, and we initially built a product that we concluded wasn't going to work. And so about a year ago, we built and are now rolling it out to about a dozen companies, an AI guide for people's success. It's designed to help managers and all employees around a variety of HR processes and events that happen in the life cycle of employees.
Okay. So you're early stage, 3 years in, built a product, or at least started off with an idea, decided that wasn't going to work, pivoted to try this new thing.
Yeah.
So as CEO, you're doing the CEO things. You're fundraising, and I know that you had a pretty significant fundraise as part of this company, no doubt based on your previous success and the energy that you're bringing to this. But you're doing fundraising, and you're out there leading the vision to create this product set. Then we realize, oh, hey, this isn't going to work. We've got to pivot, try a whole bunch of other things. So I'm presuming along the way that probably meant team changes or layoff or somehow shrinking the footprint of the team. These are all super stressful events for CEOs. How does your current approach help you through those really stressful times?
I would say it's really more about how I try to go through life than a particular event. I try to go through life, with gratitude, as happy as possible, focused on awareness, focused on full body yeses, which we can talk about at some point if we want to. And so when these events happen, I still get scared. I still get sad. I still get angry. I experience all the emotions. I still have anxiety, but they're just not as powerful as they used to be, which allows me to stay in a place of, gratitude and purpose. I'm so dedicated to trying to help people be happy and successful at work that I see this as trying to be of service to humanity and not of trying to, achieve a certain necessarily business outcome in any particular week.
And speaking of full body yeses, I'd love to rewind the clock a little bit. Was the acquisition of Glint by LinkedIn, was that a full body yes for you? What did that feel like? Because a lot of entrepreneurs are, secretly hoping, hey, I really want a big company like LinkedIn and Microsoft to come and buy my startup. That'd be an awesome outcome for me. What was that process like? And was that a full body yes for you?
It was. And you're not going to hear the story of a disgruntled founder who wished he hadn't sold his company and had a terrible time for 2 years. One of the gifts that Diana Chapman gave me when I was, and I forwarded on to my team, was really a challenge of who do I need to be, or how do I need to show up so that the next 2 years, which was the time I had agreed to stay on at LinkedIn, can actually be one of the most happy, prosperous, and joyful periods of my life. Like, how can I show up in a way to lead to a higher probability of happiness than sort of show up grumpy and all these other things. And that had a profound impact on me and my team. And so, the 2 years at LinkedIn was a really positive experience for me. First of all, LinkedIn's like a very special place, with a great culture and amazing people and an incredible leadership team. Jeff Weiner and Ryan and Dan Shapiro. I mean, these people are just really great people. And so it was, I think, easier to have a good experience at LinkedIn. But I had a great experience. I miss LinkedIn. I miss the people at LinkedIn. I had a calling to do another one because that's sort of my thing. But I think it is very possible to go in with a positive attitude and actually enjoy yourself in that period.
What was the calling? So, when as far as I know, correct me if I'm got the dates wrong here, but I think 2018 was the acquisition by LinkedIn. So you're there for a couple of years. You're thinking about leaving in 2020-ish. At that point, it would have been very easy for you to say, hey, I've had a successful career. I've done all these amazing things. I'm going to go do something else, which might be retire or do something completely different. You decide, no, I'm going to jump back in and start another company. How did you get to that conclusion?
Well, often, people retire for a whole bunch of reasons. And some people retire because they really don't like their jobs, or there's something else that they like even more. For me, because sort of my hobby is building brands and teams and companies and pursuing happiness and consciousness, and I can do them together, there was really no call to retire. I mean, that siren sound is out there now, and sure, I don't know that I'll actually retire per se, just because I love what I do, but I won't be a CEO forever, I wouldn't think. But I felt like I just wanted to do one more, just for the joy of building and serving.
That's so cool. So let's pivot into that, and I'd love to get your thoughts on a lot of the problems that we're addressing with WISC, because these are all related to things like employee engagement and culture and purpose at work and stuff like that. So this is not like my unique insight here, but a lot of companies are having lower engagement than they want. People are having these crises about their jobs. There's a real backlash against the idea of work as family, right? So people are becoming more transactional in how they see their roles and their jobs. You're looking at this saying, hey, we can change this relationship, and we can give tools to employees to help them flourish and to help them really thrive inside their companies. Tell me about how you see this issue, challenge, problem emerging within companies.
People like to make big statements. One of my favorite ones is, it's never been harder to be a manager. It's like, oh, really? I don't. Is that true? Do you have any data to show that? Because I think it's never been easier to be a manager. We got all these incredible tools. We've got Slack. We've got email. We've got things like Asana, Notion. It's like, wow. So sometimes there's these memes that get started and people believe them. So I don't personally see any sort of significant changes in sort of the drivers of engagement across industry, and I don't have inside access to that information anymore anyway, so I don't have it. It seems like the things when we started Glint 10 years ago, the key drivers of engagement were those things that you talked about: purpose, culture, company prospects, confidence in the leadership team, a sense of meaning in your job. These things have been around for decades. And so the main drivers of engagement haven't really changed that much. Just sort of what they look like have changed. And there's some that have, I think balance is a good example of something that's becoming increasingly important to generations, as we've had the luxury, frankly, to look at things like balance.
Balance meaning the concept of work-life balance?
Yeah. I mean, in engagement, like, we try to move away from the work-life balance because that implies that like work is different than life, and
Right.
work is such a big part of our life but just balance in general. Yeah. How do we balance, being in the office? How do we balance being at home? How do we balance personal time? It's definitely, a challenge. And, it does seem like younger generations are more focused on having a happy, balanced life. And I love that.
And so what is the role of the manager in 2024? So we said we don't know if it's easier than it's ever been to be a manager, or if it's harder than it's ever been to be a manager. But what's the role of the manager? What are they there for? How are they supporting their teams?
We spend a lot of time thinking about, like, what are the things that actually make a good manager? And, I think when you think about the things that make a good manager, those are sort of go arm in arm with, like, what are the things that good managers do? So, good managers are good communicators. They're good at setting goals and giving feedback and recognizing, making sure there's accountability on the team. They're self-aware. They support people's growth. They make good decisions. They empower people. They have integrity. So, I think the role of a manager is to be a guide for the team and the people on the team in all areas. And, the challenge is that a lot of managers don't have the skill sets that's required to be a good manager.
Sure.
Typically what we do is we find the highest performer, and that performer then becomes the manager. And, we don't actually step back and say, I shouldn't say we don't. Actually, I think in technology in particular, they've done a very good job of separating the management track versus the technical track. So I wouldn't say we don't. I would say often we don't step back and say, what are the skills this person needs to be a good manager? And what we do frequently is, we've got a manager, the good companies, like the best companies, have some sort of manager training, and they go off to a week-long manager training. And that's a really good thing. But it's sort of like heading off to golf camp or tennis camp and expecting then to become Coco Gauff or something like that. It's like you don't become a US Open champion by going to a 1 week or a 1 month tennis camp. You get there from, years and decades of coaching and adjustments. And while I'm not saying being a manager is the same thing as winning the US Open, but what I am saying is being a manager actually involves a lot of skills. It is a fairly complex job. I don't want to say it's a hard job, but it is a complex job. And managers couldn't possibly have all the knowledge and skills that they need simply by reading one book or going to one training class. So, tying a bunch of your questions together, when we left Glint, part of it was also we felt like our work wasn't finished. We had built the leading sort of listening platform for larger enterprises, or employee engagement platform. But I didn't feel like we were actually moving the needle enough. We were reporting on the score, and we were doing it in a novel way that empowered all managers to see their scores. But we actually weren't doing enough to help managers be better managers.
Okay, so you're giving them the feedback and information they may not have seen before, but then obviously the question's coming up, which is, so what? Like, what do I do with this information? What do I do with this feedback?
Exactly. And part of the problem is about half of managers don't even get scores because there's typically a minimum threshold because we want them confidential.
Yeah.
So typically if you don't have 5 or more respondents, you don't get results. Well, the average manager, I think, has like 6 or 7 direct reports. So about half of managers did not get respondents. And then of the other 50%, some would open them and act and some wouldn't. So we really started to think about how might we help managers actually be better managers all the time? And when you look at leaders like myself, well, I am so fortunate to be able to work with someone like Diana as my coach. Like, what a gift. It's really a privilege. And in all the way that word is intended, right? But 99% of employees and even managers do not have a high quality, best in class human coach. So that's one of the promises of AI. Like, we can give every employee a coach in their pocket to help them be the best they can be.
And what are the areas that your data is showing people need the most help in? So you mentioned all the things that good managers do. They communicate and they set goals and they set accountability and so on.
Yeah.
And then now, of course, you've seen all the data that says, what are people asking for with their virtual coaches within Whisk, or what's the data showing us? Where are the biggest gaps and holes out there today for managers?
So not surprisingly, the biggest challenges or gaps or holes for managers are typically around people conflict resolution. Underperformer on their team, they're not sure what to say. It's like they don't want to rock the boat because they're worried that if they talk to the underperformer and tell them they're underperforming, then they'll perform worse or they'll quit. They don't have backfill. They just don't know what to do. Or they have a peer that's a challenge to work with. They don't know, how to deal with that. Or they have a manager or somebody else in the organization that's causing stress for them. So yeah, the biggest chunk of sessions on Whisk are typically around, how do I deal with this people challenge? And companies have these incredible talented HR business partners that can help with that. But the reality is the average HR business partner in the polls and conversations we've done supports somewhere between 200 and 500 employees.
So there's no way they're close enough to the problem, or they don't know these people well enough.
They can't be there on a regular basis. They're mostly the good ones are strategically planning the organization, working with leaders, adding real value at that level, and then the hair on and then going to the hair on fire problem.
Right.
So the small question about what's the best way to word this in an email or in a performance review, or how should I follow up on a performance review? It just seems too mundane for them to ask anyone, so people don't ask. But now, with the promise of AI and AI guides and coaches, we can actually give all employees and all managers access to this kind of support.
So let me try something out with you. You're not an AI coach, Jim. You're a human coach. So with your background and your experience, how does someone, because there's a lot of people listening to this podcast who have this same issue. I've got someone on my team who's not pulling their weight, or I have to have a difficult conversation with them, or what have you. Like, how does one best approach this consciously? Like, what do I say? How do I kickstart this conversation? How do I get the resolution that I'm looking for?
Well, I think I would answer that question the way I'd probably answer a lot of questions about how do you approach something consciously. I would say one cheat code for approaching anything consciously is to approach it with curiosity. Like, if you come from a place of I'm right, they're wrong, that's not likely going to lead to the best outcome. If you come from a place of curiosity, this person seems to be underperforming. Let me understand that better. Maybe how could I take responsibility for the situation? Did I onboard the employee in the right way? Have I made it clear what the expectations are? Have I given them feedback? Have I created a safe space for them to ask for help? Do I have collaboration on my team where people can ask for help? So that's an example of approaching from a place of curiosity. What if something's going on for this employee? Have I asked them how they're doing? Have I checked in with them? Have I asked them how things are going? So I would say, I don't want to say conscious leadership is all about curiosity, but I'd say it's a really good cheat code for making sure you're above the line and making sure you're being conscious and thoughtful.
So start there. So I start there with curiosity, and then I realize, hey, you know what? I did do all these things. I onboarded them, and I have given them feedback before, and I still find a lot of stress and anxiety, and I'm concerned that we're not getting there. And I can do two things. I can say, well, hey, I learned about my curiosity, and then fine, I'm just going to kind of sit with that and see what happens. Or the courageous thing is I go out and engage with this person, and I say, here's what I'm noticing. Here's my concerns. I know there's some frameworks around that. I can't think of them off the top of my head for having those conversations, but I know that they cause people all sorts of stress and anxiety just thinking about needing to have these conversations.
Totally. If you've done all these things, you've tried to coach the individual, you've tried to make sure the individual had every opportunity to be successful, the individual is still struggling, then you've got to look at your story like, oh, it's a bad thing if we terminate this person's employment. Like you can't even know that. That might actually be a gift to them. They might be so unhappy in their job. And so then you think about sort of conscious actions, around ending the employment. And, I would say often that is the right answer. You have to move forward and terminate somebody who's not a good fit with the role.
And you call that conscious action.
Well, I think it can. I think you want to act consciously. It can be conscious. You want to do it in a thoughtful way. That's more about so it doesn't appear to be a fit in the role, a way that's not critical, that's not demeaning. Hopefully you've got a so-called soft landing system at your company where people get severance and other types of support, like healthcare, resume support, career counseling, etc. But we do live in a capitalist system, and companies do grow and expand and do have performance issues. And part of being a leader is you have to address those and take care of them and act on them.
To me, that's a huge part of it, is accepting the responsibility to say, my role as a leader is to do these things. My role as a leader is to make sure the company has resources and the vision is understood, or whatever it is, all these things. And part of that role that I take responsibility for is making sure the right people are doing the right things. And if we have a fit that is not correct, that we're doing something about it. And that responsibility, there's a reason that's the first commitment in the 15 commitments. It's hard. It's hard to sit there and say, I am willing to take responsibility for everything that's going on here, for the full picture in my life, which includes what is my role as leader.
Yeah, it's such an important reminder, not just for conscious leadership, but happiness in life. I think our brains can trick us into blaming our lack of happiness on things outside of us or people outside of us, and sort of learning to take responsibility for where you are in life. By the way, that's not necessarily, there's a big difference between taking responsibility and blaming yourself. It's not blame or shame. It's just taking the right level of responsibility for where you are in your life.
Now, Jim, how do you think about, a topic that comes up a lot that I'd love to get your perspective on is personal values. How do you think about defining your personal values? How do you act on them intentionally? How do you make yourself known to the people around you?
That's a really timely question right now because of the elections that are coming up and things that happen in the world. I have generally found that there's certain types of values that it's important to share with your group. You set values as a company. So one of the things we do is, we have sort of mission, vision, and then we have, a list of values, list of descriptions of our culture. I think the way you share values mostly is by how you show up in the world. Like you can post company value, and by the way, all the company values, it's like, oh, we value creativity and people, and it's
They're
like,
all pretty bland.
oh my God. But the way you really show what your values are is how you show up in the world and how you treat each other. And so that's how I typically show my values, the way I talk about things, whether it's business opportunities or how to handle problems or situations. That's how I show my values. I don't tend to talk about politics in the office. I feel like that's my story is that's too divisive. That it's hard to create an inclusive culture when the CEO is pounding on the table a political point of view. And I experienced that once. I was at a company where the CEO, this was certainly not LinkedIn. It was much earlier in my career. The CEO was, very political and very clear which candidate they were supporting, and it made it uncomfortable for some of the employees.
Yeah, no matter which side you're on, it's going to create an us versus them.
Yeah, I mean, I do find I have felt from time to time it has been important to have a point of view. There were some moments that came out that there were political leaders talking in ways that felt like, I don't know, immigrants and diversity were not welcomed. And, to me, that was like that so crossed the line. Glint at the time was a company founded and built mostly by immigrants. I think I was the only person. I think when we were like 10 people, I think I might have been the only person that was born in the United States or something like that. And so I felt that was so offensive and so against what we stood for in trying to build a more inclusive, conscious world that I did speak out about that. But generally, I try to avoid sort of policy and political topics.
Yeah, no, got it. Makes sense. Jim, as we wrap up here, one of the questions that I'd love to ask is, um, if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm just starting out, or small company, or I've just started the journey, and I value building a great culture, and I value employee engagement, and I want to get things right, what are the handful of things that I can do right away? Now, of course, as a CEO, I've got a million things going on. I'm literally doing 150 different things a day. But what are the things that I really should be thinking about when it comes to people, values, culture, practices, and stuff like that to build a really excellent culture and with high engagement?
That is such a juicy question. I was so excited to answer this question because I've never met a CEO who didn't think they wanted to have a good culture. Like maybe there's one out there, but I've never heard
and they're certainly not listening to this podcast.
Or met a CEO that set out to have a bad culture. The problem is that they're so focused on the other things that they ruin their culture. They're so focused on control. Often young entrepreneurs in particular, they think it's about them and they've got to get there. It's like they're going to make it happen. It's all on their shoulders. Being an entrepreneur is hard. There's that story out there, and so they start to micromanage. They don't realize the importance of taking care of people and culture. They think that that's something. Oh, that's like a luxury. We'll do that down the road once we raise our Series C. And they're probably thinking of things like buy the foosball table or something like that, which is an example of culture, but that's not culture. And so my advice would be, don't just talk about culture. Actually, let your actions show how important culture is. How to create, really dedicate yourself to creating a culture of thoughtfulness, inclusion, empowerment, responsibility, communication, collaboration, all these things, and be very, very thoughtful and purposeful about it. I think it's super important. Unfortunately, we have CEO leaders that demonstrate really bad behaviors. And unfortunately, there's some very successful ones. And so I think they create bad role models. I think some entrepreneurs might see, well, I want to be as successful as so-and-so, therefore I can act badly like so-and-so. And my experience is that's not the case. That person succeeded in spite of their behavior, and that people are much better off trying to be like Satya at Microsoft than some of the bad behaviors.
Yeah, great. No, I mean, really, what I'm hearing you say is make it a priority. If you want it to be a priority, make it a priority.
Yeah. And if you don't make it a priority, the culture is not going to be as good as you'd want it to be.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining us and spending time. I can certainly see your passion for happiness and success in the workplace coming through loud and clear. It was really tremendous of you to join us here on the Conscious Entrepreneur Podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime. Thank you so much. It was fun.